Welcome today to this month's Unbridled Leadership Lab, where today the topic is the wisdom of nature's cycles, restoring energy and celebrating accomplishments. And when I was planning this, I thought we're getting to the end of the year. This is a time of reflection and moving forward. So this seemed like a really pertinent topic to do right now as we come into the Christmas season. And the Christmas season, as we're going to talk about, is the time winter energy. And there's some specific things that come up with that winter energy that is probably useful for us all to think about in terms of business. So just in terms of what we are going to cover today, we are going to look at some nature-inspired solutions. So discover how nature's wisdom of energy cycles can be applied to business to help us restore and refresh ourselves at this time of year. We also like to give you lots of actionable strategies to help you leverage the energy of the seasons. And hopefully we can engage in some collaborative insights and some meaningful discussions around the topic. So that's what we're going to be doing today. You will get a recording of this afterwards. So if you don't want to make any notes, I see you being very diligent there, Anne, you're fine. I can send you the recording afterwards. That's fine. But I thought I'd kick off with this quote from Lao Tzu. Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. And that just seems so appropriate right now because we're getting into, or we are in the depths of the winter season. I've got to say, I'm super happy that the end of next week, I believe, end of next week is the shortest day of the year because it feels like winter's been going on for a long time. I have some horses and you can imagine at this time of year, it's dark by 3:30. And if you're also working outside, you get that. The day seems very short. So I just love that nature doesn't hurry things, yet everything is accomplished. And yet in business, we are very remiss at doing this. We seem to go through life at 20,000 miles an hour. We go through life basically at the same, almost I'd like to say the same level of energy. If you imagine it's a bit like your foot on the accelerator and your foot's down and everything keeps going. But we know from nature that nature doesn't work like that. Nature works in cycles. And it's so important that we recognize within ourselves and within our businesses of this need to have these peaks and troughs in our business to slow down and hurry up when we need to. I've pulled a lot of this information today from my book, Unbridled Business, which is about how we can leverage nature's wisdom to reinvent the whole way that we're running and leading businesses in the 21st century, because I think there's so much wisdom. And actually, I talk a lot about nature has a blueprint for a better way that we can lead and run businesses. So I thought I would kick off with this slide. That I hired a cartoonist to create a number of cartoons for the book. And I love this one that he had here. With the horse looking through the window going, "We are all dependent on one another. You ought to try sharing information too," as he looks into the boardroom of a meeting. And the horse in the background going, "Forget the silo mindset," because nature really understands the value of everything being interconnected. But a lot of the clients that I work with seem to regard their business all as separate silos. And therefore, we tend to lead to this independent mindset, driven often by egos. And everyone starts competing against each other within the organization rather than collaborating for its success. And I think nature has really mastered how to work together collaboratively. And we see in nature a lot of symbiotic relationships happening where nature understands the ecosystem principles that one part of nature supports another part of nature that supports another part of nature. And therefore this interdependence, and one can't exist without the other. They've all got to cooperate together. This cartoon just makes me chuckle whenever I see of it. And in business, we tend to have these boom and bust cycles as well, where we see this, right, in the economic situation, boom and bust, boom and bust. So we know that cycles exist within business. We just don't think about them in the same way that we do with nature. Because nature has quite a lot of regularity to the cycles that exist within it. Whereas in the economic situation in businesses, often we're not quite sure how long those cycles are going to be. I'm actually doing some work right now and some studying on the whole topic of reinvention, which I think is really because I think what we see in nature is continually reinventing to adapt to the circumstances around it. And yet we often don't see that in business. And there's a piece of research that was brought to my attention recently, which was in the past, maybe the average lifespan of a business could be anything up to 75 years. And now the latest research from PwC is saying that for many businesses, the average life cycle is only 3 years. And within 3 years, you're going to have to continually reinvent to become something else. And I think that's just fascinating for how that needs to change our perspective on change management, because actually we are just living in a continual world of evolution where things are just changing a lot more rapidly than in the past. So let's just look a little bit at these cycles that we've got. So we'll all be familiar with nature's kind of 4 main cycles of the year. So the springtime of the business, springtime of the year is where we're planting the seeds and setting the intention for things that are going to be happening. And then in the summer, it's all about growth and nurturing relationships. In the autumn, it's all about harvesting the results and celebrating the accomplishments. And the winter's all about rest, reflection, restoration. And nature's always staying in harmony. And what we see is that these 4 cycles are working interdependently together to achieve what it does. Because if there's something that goes out of kilter in one of the seasons, then it has a ripple impact on everything else. So what I did was I took these seasons of the year and I've created what I call the Unbridled energy system based on the 5 elements. So some of you might be familiar with the 5 elements from Chinese philosophy in terms of how businesses, in terms of how things work. And what I really love about the 5 elements is that they give us a way of looking at business in a way that is unique, but also bears its roots in a lot of, what's the word I want to use, tradition, steeped in tradition from the Chinese elements. So if we look at the Chinese elements, we've got water, wood, fire, earth, metal. And these basically map to 5 seasons of the year, where we put in winter, which is the winter season, which is water element, spring, which is wood, summer, which is fire energy, earth, which we've created as a what we call late autumn to make everything match through, and metal, which is the autumn season. And in the 5 elements, this big thick line round the outside, that's the process of construction. Because if we think about it, water nourishes wood, and wood feeds fire, and fire creates earth, and earth bears metal, and metal enriches water. So there's a cycle going around the outside of construction. But on the inside, we've also got a cycle of destruction going on within nature, where we see that the wood leaches the earth of minerals. Fire melts metal. Earth absorbs water. Metal destroys wood, and water extinguishes fire. So this is how we see how everything interrelates together. And there's a cycle of consequences that happen when everything gets moved in a different way. So what does that mean for our businesses? When we look at these energies, we see that each of the energies has something different happening about them. When we think about water energy is all about duality. It can be fast and it can be slow. It's an energy that teaches us, this water energy of winter, about rest and sustainability, allows us time to reflect and learn and move on to a higher level of success. And that's what we're just going to be looking at a little bit later on. And it's this energy that drives our willpower and our purpose. And it gives us our mojo and is responsible for our well-being. And this winter time is really a time where we get to reflect on what's happened in the year. And this can be a time of success, a time of plenty. If we think about the farming cycle, winter is either a time where we've got lots of grain in the store because we've harvested it and we're well prepared for winter, or it might be that it's a time of struggle because actually our crops haven't been as fruitful as we had hoped throughout the year. So water is this time for really pausing in the winter and thinking about what's happened and seeing the results of how the year has gone. And that's what we're going to be looking at in our business today. So the wood energy is associated with spring, the start of new ideas. It's a chaotic time of new beginnings and growth, and everything's fresh and alive. And it's a time of ideas and innovation of how to get things done. And what I see in business is a lot of people planting these new ideas. But actually what we need time is these new ideas to grow. And we live in a very much instant gratification society, I think you can agree, where we want everything now. And in business, I see a lot of time us planting ideas, but then we're literally pulling up the shoots before they have time to take hold. Then the fire energy, which is summer, is a lot of heat and expansion. It's a time of relationship building, energizing team members. This is a time of where we really grow our business. We've planted the ideas in the spring, and now they're beginning to come to fruition in the summer. And then we move into late autumn, the earth energy. Well, we've done a lot of the work. And this is a kind of slower time with less growth. We typically find the energy that characterizes this time of year as ones of and stillness and caring and looking after our suppliers and our stakeholders. Maybe it's a time for building relationships like joint ventures and collaborations. And then we get to the metal energy of autumn. So that's the culmination of all the previous seasons. And this is the time when we really get to harvest what we've done. And it's a bit of detachment and efficiency going on. And actually, autumn is a time of no waste because actually we've got to get everything done in a really efficient time. And just the seasons, people have these different seasonal energies within them. So we find people with a lot of metal energy are super efficient and they don't want to waste a penny of what they've got. So we've got these different energies where we're moving from creation to connection to consultation to calculation to contemplation. And that's how everything works within business. So then what we've done is we've mapped these energies over to what does each of these energies really mean for your business? What's going on at each different step? So let's start with the water energy is all about why we are doing the business. What is our purpose? Why are we in business? What's the difference that we want to make? And the why, having a really clear why on our business is so important for our customers so that they really understand what is happening in the business, why we're doing it. We know that people like buying from purpose-driven companies. So they want to know why we're doing what we're doing. What's the difference that your business wants to make? And really important as a business that we get clear on this because our team members also want to know why we are in business. What is the difference that we really want to make in the world? Because that's what they buy into. That's what keeps them engaged. That's what helps them pull in the same direction. And then the wood energy is all about the plans that we've got in the business. What strategy are we using to operate the business in? So we're always answering the question with wood energy. And then our fire energy relates to people. Who are we working with within the organization? Who are our customers or our clients? Who are our team members? Who are our stakeholders? Who are our suppliers? Really important that we get clear on that as well. And then our priorities, which is the earth energy. Where and when should we focus our activities? This is related a little bit to what? Are we an online business? Where are we delivering? Are we delivering online or in person? When are we delivering? And then the fifth, the metal energy, is all about the processes. How should we organize things? And do we have the right systems in place to improve them? So every business needs a combination of these energies to prosper and succeed. And hopefully you will recognize that within a business, we really need to be clear on our why, what, our who, our where, when, and our how. Because what happens if any of these areas are not aligned, then the business falls into disharmony or dis-ease. I love the word disease, D-I-S, and if you think about it, dis and then ease, E-A-S-E. So the business forms into dis-ease, i.e. a lack of harmony, when we don't have everything aligned. And in the worst cases, we find our businesses imploding. And we find this happening when leaders tend to be focused on the short-term game rather than the long-term game. Nature really understands the importance of playing a long-term game. Nature doesn't just think, oh, I'll get what I need right now, and all the other entities around me, all the other plants and wildlife, it's all about me. No, nature doesn't think like that. Nature understands that everything is an ecosystem, and how one plant survives is dependent on everything else. And if we just think about a plant for the moment, a plant out in the woods, it survives. Obviously, it needs water, but where does it get that water from? Often it's from the network of root systems that are operating under the soil. They're invisible. We don't see them. But that is where the plant's getting a lot of their moisture from. If those other trees weren't around them, then that plant wouldn't survive. And isn't that just an interesting concept to bring into business? What would happen if we stopped understanding that business all needed to interrelate together to work effectively? So just before I come back into the room and we have a quick discussion about this, I just wanted to share one last thing with you. Going back to these business growth phases. Because if you think about it, where a business starts is with the ideas, the water. Maybe a business owner comes up with an idea about what they want to accomplish, what's driving them. And then the wood season is more about a business being in a startup phase. And the summer is when it starts to mature a little bit. And then the earth season, the late spring, is when the business is fully mature. And then we move into that metal to the autumn time, which is a time when the business really often needs to think about reinventing itself before it moves back again to the winter season. So I'd be curious. I'm just going to stop sharing a moment. I'd be really curious to hear from you guys. Where do you think your business is? In which season do you think your business is? Is it more in a startup? Is it more mature in the summer or autumn phase? Summer or early autumn? Or is it at the point where we are needing to start reinventing it in order to move forward? Have you got any thoughts about where their business might be? Or have you ever thought about your business having seasons like this about when it moves through?
I'll be brave. I'll start.
Yeah, go Anne. Thanks.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of aspects that I can well relate to, like the company that I work for, with these seasonalities, and also maybe to some extent not only for the company as a whole, but maybe also for parts of the company, for functions or for product segments and the like. And I think pretty much where we are currently is probably somewhat in summer, but I think probably it's rather difficult to go from summer to that late summer, really nourishing and really making sure that you harvest what you have, and that you then go into this kind of like renovation or reinvention phase. Then also, I think contemplation is something I don't see that often in our company, but that is, I think, for me, that seems to be the hardest part, because as you said, we're planting a lot, and then maybe also we take the sprouts out of the soil a bit too early. And that brings us into trouble over summer, because then we can't harvest that much, or we are maybe too eager to harvest already and we're not patient enough. So this is something that came to my mind when you described that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I see a lot of businesses, like I said, really trying to harvest too early when we haven't really, the seeds haven't been sown. And that's probably a bigger problem for entrepreneurs. We're so anxious to get going. Mike, what about any thoughts for you or Hugh about where your businesses might be on that cycle?
A little more complicated because ours isn't a business per se, although of course it is a
Yeah.
business. I work for the City of York Council, and
Right.
we have all sorts of cycles, but a lot of them are very political and financial.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the cycles sometimes are determined because we have a council election every 4 years, by elections.
Oh,
So
yeah. Yeah.
general elections get called and mayoral
Mm.
elections now. And all these things mean that plans that we may make sometimes have to be put on hold because we have,
Mm.
it's not called PERDA anymore, it's called pre-election period, during which time we're not allowed to sort of do anything that might at all be controversial or in any way might be to benefit or harm any of the parties.
Yes.
I guess in nature, I know that climate's changing and it might be more difficult nowadays. It's difficult to predict the weather, but you pretty much, summer's going to come before autumn, autumn's going to come before winter. In local government, it's a lot more unpredictable, and the financial things also tends to follow the political side of things. So yeah, we just have so many outside influences that can affect us. But the other comment I'd make is you'll talk about nature quite often cooperating. I think the opposite is probably true of councils. I think they want to see to be cooperative. But inside, there's lots of baronies competing against each other for influence, finance, promotion. And it sometimes makes it very difficult to achieve. We might be one council, but a lot of the individuals within that council are very much self-interested, shall we say.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's a lot that we see, particularly in the public sector, but in the private sector too, where it's still that's I'm in charge of the marketing department and I need all of these resources in my team and somebody else needs them in their team, but nobody wants to share them. And it's my big frustration about business. And actually, one of the reasons I became so interested in nature and nature's principles was when I was working in the corporate world in London at Deloitte. I had a role, a kind of global role actually, where I saw everything going on. And what frustrated me more than anything else was somebody in this team doing something that had half been done over here, nobody sharing the resources, and we would just kept replicating the same thing time and time again. And it just drove me insane because in nature, you don't see any wasted time, energy, and resources. Everything's happening for a reason, right? But yet in business, we see this all the time, these silo mentalities where it's all about me. And we haven't managed to really begin to understand that business is about we and how do we get to the result? Because I think for some reasons, a lot of companies still aren't really clear and haven't managed to articulate to people enough the benefit of what the purpose is, what the organization is trying to achieve, and then how everyone can drive forward towards that point. And people having the confidence that if their team doesn't do so well, somebody else is going to have their back because everyone's in a self-preservation mode, unfortunately, in the human world. But we know that in nature, and I love this analogy, when I think about things like I spent a lot of time out in Africa, living out in the bush, and zebras typically, right, would be the lion's prey, right? And so they have a high awareness of where the lions are. But they know you can often find lions and zebras at the waterhole at the same time because they've both got the same purpose. They need some sustenance and they know that the lion's just eaten, so they know they're going to be safe. But so they can read the energy of the situation and what's going on and know that's not a point when they need to run and be fearful of the lion and that they can coexist together in those moments. Yeah, we've got a long way to go in business. I'm not saying I've got all the answers. I've got a nirvana of how I would love it to look if we really worked with the seasons and understood the energy of things. But it takes everyone being very brave and understanding that everybody's working for the health, harmony, and unity of the whole. I work a lot with horses, and within the horse herd, that is always what's happening, health, harmony, and unity of the herd. And everyone's looking out for each other. And unfortunately, that's not the case in business. Everyone is in a siloed, this is my space, I need to protect it mentality. The more we talk about this, hopefully the more we start to change some of the perspective on it. So,
And for me, Julia, this is really all about the purpose and the winter, that we
Yep.
just need maybe sometimes more winter to just really align on the purpose, because ideally this is something that everybody in an organization would be able to rally around, to relate to and work towards. So I think this is maybe sometimes a like lack of visibility for the purpose in the organizations that makes people more prioritize their own interest or the interest of their kind of like team.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Hugh, is there anything you wanted to add, sir?
Lovely to see you again, Julia. Happy.
And you too.
Since we were up at High Trin House. Look, I don't want to add too much other than and you probably heard my dog barking, so the natural cycle will require me to go out shortly. But I frustrated not to join just because I was on a family matter before. But I just want to congratulate the effort here, because I really think it's what's needed. I think humans have lost touch with nature. Never mind business. I'm really chiming with a couple of things, which is the I-ness of everything instead of the we-ness, and
Weeness. Yeah.
slight play on words with the horse herd. But I think we're all charging around and nobody's listening. So we all want to be heard, but nobody's listening. And so I think I was looking at the model. I'm not sure where I am on the model. I'm sorry, definitely ready for winter and some more contemplation. But I also note is the natural cycle of learning. And I think in business, it's just with things going so fast that people are caught in plan do without any reflection or conversation to apply new ways of looking at it. So I love the natural cycle of things. And I often find myself doing this with my clients who happen to be Deloitte partners, running in sustainable ways. Is growth is not upwards and to the right at 20%. That's the cycle of growth.
No.
And it has been for millions. And while, it's just go round and round in the cycle, as your model shows. So look, I don't want to your time, but I wanted to connect and say hi and well done, and I will follow up.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'd love to. Yeah. No, and I think that's so important. That growth isn't linear for any of us. Our business is never linear in its growth. But unless we take those time to reflect on what's happening, then we can never, ever move to the next phase, or move to the next phase effectively, having taken the lessons along the way. And I think there's such a struggle in business right now to all continually be doing, instead of where do we slow down and stop and reflect and have that contemplation time so that we can take the lessons and then move them forward. And this is what I'd really encourage you in the winter to do. And I love the fact that hopefully some of you might be I'm going to be naughty. I'm taking 2 weeks off this Christmas just because of the way everything lands. I'm going out the office for 2 weeks. And I'm super excited because that gives me time to step away from the weeds that most of us are in all day, every day, and actually have that time to reflect about what's really going on. I'm just going to share a couple more things with you. There we go. All right. So just to mention this before we move on to the next section is that remember that you are part of the organization, and how you show up is impacting the team, the division, the enterprise, and the stakeholders. So I just wanted to just leave that thought with you, because everything creates this ripple effect around us. And each team member, even at a more granular level, we're all comprised of a series of cells that interact. And our human health only works when we keep everything in balance, in homeostasis. And it's the same with the organization. Like we said, the organization only thrives when everyone is aligned and pulling together in the same direction. And when the conflict arises and when that doesn't happen and we get teams and businesses misaligned, that's when we see the poor performance, inefficiencies, and lack of productivity. So let's just talk a little bit about here, restoring energy through the winter. Because this is really a time for stillness, replenishment, and preparation for growth. And I think it's just ironic, actually, that a lot of people tend to, where they can, I know it's not possible for everybody, take some time out over the Christmas period to this rest and relax, because leaders need to do this, to pause, to avoid burnout. And I just love in the horse herd that the power of the pause is so poignant, because whenever danger arises in the horse herd, the first thing they do is pause and reflect before they decide the course of action they're going to take. So they have this period of discernment where they decide what's going to happen. And in this period of discernment, they're really making a couple of decisions. They're deciding, is that a mountain lion that's approaching that means I need to run? Or is that just a little tabby cat in the undergrowth that's never going to hurt me and I can stay where I am? But the problem, I think, in business is immediately when we see something that we think might be danger, we immediately react and we start running. And we don't spend that time to pause and think, what is the right type of energy I need to respond in this situation? So in this winter season, I'd really encourage you to think about how do you fuel your success for next year. And I'd like to share a nature-inspired process with you, which is POA. So the P stands for pause. We want to step back and reflect on the issue and think about the stillness of winter. And I just love this picture of these trees in full blossom, but very still and quiet in that bright winter light. So really, let's step back and reflect on what's happened and observe the situation, then really objectively identifying facts and feelings that related to it. And then once we've paused and we have observed what's happening, then we're in a position to adapt and maybe brainstorm new solutions and agree on a new way forward. So I think this is why people often get to this time in winter. And this is the time when people make all their New Year's resolutions, isn't it? And what are the new things we're going to do going forward? Obviously, we know, though, that, however, New Year's resolutions, people aren't always so good at actually implementing. But the idea is there that we need to really think about what do we need to adapt and change going forward. So my invitation to you in this winter season is to really, gone too far. Go back. Is to really celebrate what you have achieved in 2024. Remember, we said the winter season, we have two things going on. We've either got this barn full of grain, we've had some successful harvest, and we've had an amazing 2024, or the barn's a little bit depleted, and we're like, okay, business wasn't as good as we had expected. We don't have as much revenue in the bank, as much profit in the bank. So what do we need to do differently? But for whatever the situation is for you, really spend time with you and your team to celebrate the great things you've achieved in 2024. I think as business leaders, generally, we are very poor at celebrating. We are great going, oh, could have done this better, or we could have done this better. But please, this energy of celebration is so important to help galvanize our team to move back into the spring season. So let's celebrate all the great things you've achieved in 2024. And something I'd encourage you to do is have some sharing circles with your team members and get them all to bring to the table something that maybe they've personally achieved this year. Myself, between now and the new year, I will spend some time really reflecting on what those celebrations are. What are the things that I've done really well this year? As well as having a look at the things that maybe didn't quite go as well to plan. I will have got learning from them. And what, importantly, I want to celebrate the learning I can take from the things that didn't go to plan. Because that's where the lessons are, and that's where the growth is going to happen for next year. Also spend some time being really grateful for what has happened in 2024. Gratitude is such an amazing energy to get into. In an ideal situation, we would practice gratitude every day. What are 5 things we're grateful for today? It really changes our mindset about how we feel about what is going on. And related to that, you might want to encourage your teams to do a gratitude circle where they share with each other what is one thing that they are grateful for each colleagues. So it's effectively like a positive feedback loop for our team members. And that, again, can be super, super powerful. There's a ritual that we can do here in the winter season. And the other thing I'd love you to encourage you to do is, as we said, winter is about restoring energy. I'd love you to think about which energy do you need to restore? So I'd like you to think about energy on 4 different levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Because a lot of us, when we think about restoring our energy, we think in terms of physical energy. So things like diet, exercise, rest. So what does overuse look like? It looks like exhaustion. And underuse looks like lack of movement. So I don't know about you, but during the storm at the weekend, I was definitely in underuse, a bit of a lack of movement, hanging out on the couch, not wanting to go outside and hunkering down, right? And the overuse is this exhaustion, which a lot of us are facing as we get to the end of the year. And I love that we see a lot of animals in the winter. They physically hibernate, right? They go into this lack of movement in order to conserve their physical energy, in order to nurture them through the winter season when they don't have the foods. Energy is also emotional energy, and this comes from connection with other people. So overuse of the emotional energy, it looks like disconnection from self, and underuse looks like disconnection from others. Then we also have mental energy, and that's all about curiosity. And an overuse of mental energy looks like analytical overload, and an underuse looks like boredom and frustration. And then we've got spiritual energy. So this is all about your purpose, the why that we were talking about with that winter energy. And overuse maybe looks like sometimes we're always focused on the cause, and underuse looks like you're disconnected from meaning and purpose. So one thing I'd like to invite you to do is think about what is a positive energy ritual that you can do to replenish each of these different types of energies. Because what I often find is when I say to people, this is a great time for restoring energy, although clearly we need to be restoring energy throughout the whole year, otherwise we don't have the energy to get through the cycles. We need to restore the right type of energy. So a lot of times I see people trying to restore physical energy when maybe it's their emotional or mental energy that they need to be replenishing. So a really great thing to do is just think about which of my energies is depleted right now, and make sure you replenish the energy in the way you need. So if you're feeling like you're feeling a bit depleted in terms of emotional energy, that means that you might need to go out and spend time with friends and family to reinvigorate that level of energy. So just very interesting to think about, how do we replenish our different types of energy? And finally, I just wanted to share with you a goal-setting framework for going into 2025. And the easiest way to do this is just to grab a piece of paper and put 3 columns down it. And in the first column, we want to put seeds to plant. These are the new ideas, the things that we want to get happening during 2025. Just like nurturing and the seeding, planting seeds in the ground that will come up next year, we want to be doing that with our business, thinking about what are the seeds we want to plant, the new ideas in the business. In the second column, I'd love you to think about what are the weeds that we need to remove, the obstacles that are going to prevent us maybe getting those seeds to fruition. For some of you, that might be the bureaucracy in your organizations, the politics. Some of the weeds we can remove. Some of them we might not be able to remove. So what's our plan for getting around them? And finally, in the third column, we want to think about what do we need to do to nurture the soil that we're planting our ideas in? In other words, what support systems do we need in place in order to get the new ideas to fruition? They might be people, they might be resources, but what support do we need in order to achieve that? And I just love this goal-setting framework because it just so clearly aligns with the way we need to do things in nature, to plant, to weed, and to nurture. So with that, I'm just going to stop sharing and just see if anyone's got any comments that they want to add in. Anything that came out of that you're like, oh, that's a big aha, I'd like to do that.
I just want to say thank you, Julia. I think that's been a lot of kind of like good nudges that come at exactly the right time now that we're heading into winter season. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Very
welcome.
helpful.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So
For
with
me,
that, go please, Mike.
so for me, it's just, I just sort of type this on my computer so I remember it. For me, it's just having the time to do things.
Yes.
Because of the cuts and everything, I'm now doing people's jobs. And if anybody's off, I'm doing their job. So it's just having that time to reflect that I used to have, and I could plan strategies, ways forward, develop people. But suddenly you're just so bogged down in the day job, but you don't get much to do that. And I'm thinking, you're very fortunate if you've got 2 weeks off over Christmas. Unfortunate. I've got 2 days off
One day.
at work, 2 days off, 1 day at work, which means that I can't really get going with anything very much.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. Usually Christmas, New Year, it's the time, as you say, we'll reflect. Maybe some of us make plans, resolutions, whatever you want to call them. I don't think I'm going to have that this year. So I've got to think, how can I find a little bit of time to myself to start thinking?
It's a really big challenge because, and in fact, you might want to listen to today's podcast that came out, which was all about middle managers being the unsung heroes in organizations. Because the problem is the middle managers in the organization are just getting squeezed from the top and the bottom, right? We're getting so much stuff put on us that we can't move. And the irony is we've got senior leadership, and Anne, who was on the call, is a client of mine as well. And you've got the challenges, you've got senior leadership that want you to be more strategic, but you're stuck in the weeds, you're firefighting all the time because you've not got this time to reflect. And there is something that we've got to, structurally within organizations, figure out how can we create and craft that time to actually spend a bit of time reflecting. And some of it, I think, is that we don't allow ourselves permission to do it. I don't know about you, I've been brought up with the kind of mindset, if you're not busy, then you're lazy and you're not doing anything. And it's almost like that permission to stop and reflect and not actually do. A lot of people don't feel, I know sometimes I feel guilty if I do that, right? But it's so important. And I'll own it for myself. Like I said, if I'm not busy, I'm not doing something, I don't feel it that the time's worthwhile. And yet I know intellectually that when I do slow down and I spend time and I look up and I see what's going on, I'm way more aware of what's happening in the business. I see more opportunities to grow the business, and I find more innovative ways to solve problems rather than when I'm in it and I'm almost in this blinkered stage, the horse with the blinkers on. You only see straight in front of you and you're just firefighting. So I think there's a point for all of us where somehow we've got to just literally sit up, look out and see what's going on outside of us. So I think that's a big challenge that we've all got in business right now. Mike, I'm just going to share a couple of resources and I'll touch base with you after the call, but just so that we've got this on here. Let's share that. I really encourage you and anyone who's listening to this recording to reflect and take some action steps. Remember the pause, observe, adapt model that we talked about. How can you find that time to pause, recognizing that we all live in a crazy time where we are very time constrained? How can we creatively create some time to pause so that we really can observe and get our head out of the weeds and really see what's going on, and then spend some time to adapt and move forward? Because in the words of Seneca, the philosopher, true wisdom consists of not departing from nature, but in holding our conduct according to her laws and models. And I think that this is for all of us in business right now. The true wisdom and the true blueprint of how to lead and run our businesses in the 21st century really does exist in nature. If we just look to the way that nature runs and organizes everything, that's how we can find a solution to the really chaotic world that we're living in now. A few ways that you can stay connected to us. One is I really encourage you to take the Impactful Teamwork quiz. It's at www.impactfulteamwork.score.com. And there you can find out how your team is performing and the areas that you need to work on first in order to create a high-performing, cohesive team. You can, of course, connect with me on LinkedIn. I think many of us probably are connected at Julia Felton on LinkedIn. You can subscribe to my podcast. My podcast comes out every Tuesday. It's called Impactful Teamwork. You can find us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and also on my website, businesshorsepower.com. And if you'd like to schedule a teamwork ignition call so that I can help you figure out where you need to put your focus in your business right now, we can also discuss where your business is, in which of the seasons your business is, and maybe indeed what type of season person you are, because each of us also have a predominant season that we're part of. You can reach me in calendly.com/Julia Felton/discovery. So calendly.com/Julia Felton/discovery. Okay. I just want to thank everyone for attending today. It's been such a pleasure to share this with you. And if you've got any questions, then I'd be happy to answer any.